Welcome to Wine with HR. I'm Jules.
Hey there, I'm Trish.
Lawyers turned HR professionals. Through our company, Monarch Endeavors, we guide employers through their oh shit moments with their employees.
In this podcast, we will discuss some of the most common and commonly frustrating HR problems while enjoying our favorite adult beverage, wine.
So sit back, grab a glass if you choose, and join us as we think about and drink about all things HR.
Welcome to this week's episode of Wine with HR. Way back in season 2, episode 3, we talked to y'all about civility, what it is, what it isn't, and as always, of course, best practices. It occurred to us, as we are sure it did to you as well, that the best way to create civility is to create a culture of civility. And one of the things that you need to do this is by creating and consistently, can I get an echo there or something? Following a policy. So that is what we're going to talk about today. But first, Julie, what you drinking?
So today I am drinking a Sauvignon Blanc from, I don't know if it's Aveline or Aveline, but it's the Cameron Diaz wine. She either makes it or helps make it or owns it or whatever it is.
That's the one I wanted to try.
Yeah, it's all organic, vegan friendly. I think it's supposed to be lower in sugar, at least no added sugar, no artificial colors, et cetera, et cetera. So it is definitely a California Sauvignon Blanc. So it's not like our typical Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
This one, though, is better. I bought like 9 bottles because I wanted to sample a whole bunch. And
I wanted to sample a whole bunch.
Yeah.
Right.
I have to say, no offense to them, but a lot of them aren't full-bodied enough for me. Like their rosé is kind of sweet. The white wine blend is fine. The Sauvignon Blanc I like better than I liked just the white wine blend. But I am sort of laughing because it says on the bottle, pairs well with shared plates and easy conversation. And, so I may have picked the wrong wine for this conversation.
You don't think this one's going to be easy?
Oh, I don't know. We'll get into it later. But, you know, for people who don't realize how far in advance we sometimes record our episodes, we are recording this right before 4th of July weekend. Yesterday, the immunity decision came down from the Supreme Court. Last week was Chevron and all the other things. And, you know, it's the end of the world as we know it.
And I don't feel fine.
No, unless I'm drinking wine.
Wine. We still can laugh at this point.
Yes. So I don't know. I think there are parts of this conversation that may not be easy, but they're important. So it's okay. And I brought the whole bottle this time. So, you know.
Lovely.
I'm good. What about you? What are you drinking?
So it is a Tuesday for us today. Tequila Tuesday.
Woo!
Yes. Or Taco Tuesday. I mean, you know, whatever you want to call it. So I actually went for margarita because also it fit in this gigantic wine glass that I have. That's half the size of my head, 3/4. Because, I think this is going to be a difficult conversation a little bit today. But it is a mango margarita, and it is one of those pre-made, believe it or not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like a Jose Cuervo pre-made, and it's actually delicious. You know me, I'm pretty fussy about my margaritas, but for a pre-made, take it with you to the beach or wherever, it's gotcha.
I was going to ask if it was mango because of the color.
Yes. Yeah, it is mango.
Very nice.
And you know
how
I love mangoes.
Yes. And my wine glass says keep calm and pour me some wine. So that also seems fitting.
Yes, it does.
All right, here we go. So back to our WHINE of the week. We are talking about civility, but about what it really looks like in the workplace and how you can actually build this culture of civility and what that looks like. So before we get there though, Trisha.
Yes.
Hit us with some updated civility facts.
Ooh, do I have some for you? Okay, so for those of you who haven't seen, SHRM recently released their Civility Index. This is based on a survey that they did this March. So just a couple of months ago. This is really, really new. So it really gives you an idea of what's going on right now. So this is in our daily life. Are you ready?
I don't know.
No, you're not. Is everybody out there ready? 2,000 acts of incivility per second. 120,000 acts of incivility per minute. 7 million acts of incivility per hour. And 171 million acts of incivility per day. So for those of you who are wondering why we decided to talk about civility again when we just did it in episode 3, that is part of the reason. And another part is, of course, how it impacts the workplace. Jules, you have some stats for us there?
I do. So 24.7 billion instances of incivility happen in the workplace per year. So that's just the workplace.
Was that with a B?
That was with a B. Yes. Yes.
Oh my good Lord.
So that's nearly 40% of all acts of incivility that occur in the workplace. 66% of U.S. workers agree that incivility reduces productivity, which makes total and complete sense.
Yeah, not surprised there.
Yep. 59% agree that incivility causes a decline in employee morale. I would hazard a guess.
I'm surprised it's that high.
Well, or that low, I guess, right?
That's what I mean.
Yes,
That's what I mean. Yeah, I would expect it to be higher.
I was going to say, I hazard to guess that the people who didn't agree that it causes a decline in employee morale may be the ones who are being incivil.
I need a bell to ding it right on. Oh, wait, I have a straw today.
Yay.
No, that wasn't a ding.
That was unsatisfying.
Yeah, that's really unsatisfying. All right. Well, anyway, Continue.
Yes. And the last one, which, we talk to our HR professionals and managers all the time, but only 25% of employees believe that their managers are effective at handling incivility. 25%.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I tried to fake speechless, but I'm not. Managers, it's not your fault. You need the training and the guidance.
Yes.
We have you, I promise.
Yes. They also need to be empowered. And I know we'll talk about this more, but managers and HR professionals and employees need to be empowered to stand up. So that's one of the biggest problems that I see is a lot of people, the workplace does change things. Like I saw something on some social media platform where a woman had posted a story about, a male coworker saying something really sexually inappropriate to her. And she said, I just froze in that moment. I didn't know what to do. And some commenter, everybody, hindsight is 2020. You got your keyboard warriors, was like, why didn't she just slap him? That's what I would have done. It's like, number one, you can't do that in the workplace, right? Like
you shouldn't be doing it out of the workplace either. Right. Let's go there first.
There are better ways to handle things. But
yes.
People, I think sometimes people forget, number one, when it's happening to you, a lot of people freeze because it's shocking. If somebody says something harassing, incivil, just inappropriate, just outrageous, whatever it is, oftentimes our initial reaction is to freeze. And then you combine that with being in the workplace, and most people have been trained when you are in the workplace, you are a good employee, you don't speak up, you avoid confrontation, you are the good little soldier who just goes on about their business and doesn't ruffle any feathers. So we haven't been we haven't been taught how to...
I like that, taught up,
yes. We haven't been taught how to speak up in a professional and respectful way to let people know that those behaviors aren't okay.
And you can also do it on someone else's behalf if you are one who witnesses those kind of behaviors, again, in a professional,
respectful way. So we're going to talk about that for all the just, employees listening out there and all of that. But yes, being an advocate, an ally, a good bystander, actually not being a bystander, actually taking action can be really, really powerful. So again, we'll get to all of that. But before we do, Trish, give us a quick reminder of what incivility looks like in the workplace.
All right. So you guys who have been with us for a while may recognize some of these from our civility episode. So again, we're just going to go over these real quick. If you haven't been with us, if you're new to us, welcome. We appreciate you being here. This is definitely one that you'd want to go back and check out. So incivility in the workplace, what it could look like. How about losing your temper or yelling, talking to someone in a condescending tone, backstabbing or talking behind someone's back. I can hear your ice cubes. I love it.
I'm sorry. I got a refill already.
They know something good's coming. Sabotaging a project or someone's reputation, underperforming purposefully, disrupting or arriving late to a meeting, or constantly checking your email or texting during meetings. One of my big ones drives me nuts. Put the dumb phone away.
Yes.
Giving public reprimands. Obviously, we want to talk to our employees and help them improve, or talk to ways that they could be more civil, but doing that publicly, not the way to go. And not acknowledging cultural differences or communication barriers. So those are just a few that we wanted to remind you about. But y'all, there's a real reason we're talking about this. You may have guessed that by Julie and I's conversation so far. And that is because
it's the end of the world as we know it.
Yeah. Yes. I don't even know where to go other than have you sing some more. So as you, I'm sure, are aware, last month was Pride Month. And SHRM put out this awesome article on being transgender in an election year. This got Julie and I thinking about what it actually means to have civility in the workplace and what your policies could really look like if you don't have one. Do you have a civility or kindness or respect in the workplace policy, whatever you want to call it? And are you using it to be impactful, or is it just there? Do you know how to write it? Is it useful? Do people understand it? Does it actually, you have a policy, yay, big deal. And this is where we're really going with this. Does it actually have an impact on that culture? So Julie, I'm going to just sit back and let you talk about importance.
Okay. Well, building on what Trisha was saying, the article, and of course we'll have a link in our show notes, but the article about being transgender in an election year as an employee was really impactful because I think oftentimes, particularly transgender individuals are made political. And that's one of the things they said in the article. We are made political even when we're not. because other people have decided that that's a political issue. Everything from what bathroom should people use to what pronouns are used to how somebody identifies themselves to what, et cetera, et cetera. And I think too often we forget how that impacts the actual person, the actual human behind all of this rhetoric. And the vast majority of people, I believe, I don't have statistics to back this up, but I believe that the vast majority of people don't actually know someone who's transgender. So they are basing their beliefs and assumptions and all that other stuff on what they have heard and not, from any personal experience. And as we've talked about in the past, exposure is one of the most powerful ways to reduce hatred, otherism, prejudice, stereotypes, all of that kind of thing. And I think that that's part of why we wanted to have this conversation today, because oftentimes we think that it is the company's responsibility to create a culture of civility. And it is. At the top, it is. But it's also everyone's responsibility, because we all are part of the culture and we get what we tolerate. That's one of the most impactful statements I've ever heard. And I don't remember who said it, but it's true. We get what we tolerate. And we have to start teaching people, no matter what their role is in a company, that they don't have to tolerate incivil, hateful, prejudicial behavior. They don't, So my biggest philosophy, and people who have taken my classes know this, and you've certainly known it, and I'm kind of excited there's been an episode where I get to say it, but my personal philosophy is just don't be a dick.
Wait, could you repeat that, please?
Don't be a dick. Like if there's a choice, choose the path where you're not a dick. And that solves a whole lot of problems.
Yeah.
And we can't cater to the people who are being dicks, which oftentimes is what happens because they're the loudest voices and they make the biggest stink. And so then people think that that more people agree with them than is accurate. So we're going to get into that more. But the other important piece of this, and this is a quote from another SHRM article, an interview with Johnny C. Taylor Jr., who is the current SHRM president and CEO, where he said workplace incivility is a gateway drug to workplace harassment.
Can we just drop a mic right there?
I know.
I am
great.
Obsessed with that quote.
Yes. So let me say it one more time. Workplace incivility is a gateway drug to workplace harassment. And it is so true. So way back in 2015, the EEOC did a study on harassment in the workplace. And this is one of the things they found. What leads to claims of harassment are these little incivilities that build up because they're not dealt with. They're not addressed. They're allowed to go unfettered. And then they eventually get to the point where somebody feels that they're being harassed.
Let me jump in real quick, Jules.
Go ahead.
I don't want to steal your thought here, but I want to remind people that if you are not stopping those little things, people think that you support and allow that kind of behavior.
Right. Again.
All right. Sorry. So keep going.
No, that was really important. It goes back to we get what we tolerate. You know? And what is an employee supposed to think if somebody else engages in an incivil act in front of leadership and leadership doesn't say anything or the company doesn't address it?
Exactly.
Of course they're going to think it's acceptable, right?
Yep.
So,
or if they laugh, by the way.
Right. Because and sometimes that's a nervous thing and people just don't know what to do. So we don't want to make anybody feel bad for how they may have reacted in the past. our goal here is to give you tools for how to react if it happens again. How to really build that culture and be part of the solution versus part of the problem.
Love that.
Yes. So the last thing I will say on the importance of this topic is that an effective civility policy clearly defines what the company considers as unacceptable behavior in the workplace. Now, of course, that must comply with federal, state, and local law, which you can always check with your legal counsel. But you also can go above and beyond what federal, state, and local law says. So, you've heard us in other episodes, or if you've taken any of our trainings, there are certain protected characteristics, things like race, color, religion, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, veteran status, pregnancy, national origin, et cetera, et cetera. Those things are all protected by law, but you can have a broader civility policy that includes things like not picking on people because of their weight or their personal style or their looks or their personality or things like that. So again, you can always offer greater protection than the law allows, but the law is the minimum.
And since we already mentioned pride and we are talking about the law, for those of you who think this is just a personal opinion, I'd like to direct you to Bostock, a Supreme Court decision that was made back in 2020. For those of you who aren't familiar, or for those of you who don't quite recall, the whole idea behind Bostock was that we were going to look at the sex provisions of the Civil Rights Act, and the Supreme Court said that gender identity, sexual preference, etc., in the workplace is going to be considered under the Civil Rights Act as sex discrimination. Okay, so before Julie and I get into this a little more, we did want to pause for a moment and talk about the policy itself. Then, as we go through and we talk about the different parts of your policy, we're going to talk more about the purpose of the conversation we wanted to have with you today. So the basic skeleton of a policy, you can add more than this if you'd like. The purpose. Why do you have this policy? Your definitions, and we've already helped you with that, especially if you go back to episode 3. We have what is civility, what is incivility. Personal responsibility. Julie was talking about that earlier. Some sort of a complaint mechanism, and then consequences. So Julie and I are going to talk about each of these, and then, as we already mentioned, talk more about the why behind all of this. So Jules, you want to start with purpose?
Okay. So again, you want to explain to people why you have a civility policy. In a perfect world, we wouldn't need one because everybody would just be civil to each other. And again, wouldn't be a dick. But doesn't always happen. So your purpose could be things like incivility and disrespect in the workplace can be a barrier to effective communication, coaching, and performance. So that's why we have a policy. Or it could be that we just simply believe that a civil workplace leads to more engaged employees, better productivity, increased morale, greater loyalty, et cetera, et cetera. So again, that's going to be really personal to you and your company and your employees. And I think a great way to get them involved in this is to ask them, hey, why do you think civility is important? If we have to say what the purpose of our civility policy is, what would you say it is and why? Maybe make a contest out of it. Make it something fun. Get everybody engaged.
Ooh, that is so good.
Yeah.
I love getting people involved.
So Trish, why don't you talk about some of the definitions that could be included in a policy?
I would love to. I was looking at various policies from different universities, different countries even. And so some of the favorites that I found, I love this one especially. Respect others and yourself. Take good care of yourself. I thought that one was huge because I think that oftentimes when we think about civility, we think about how we're interacting with others, which of course is incredibly important. But you also, going back to what you said earlier, Jules, it's about we freeze and we don't know how to talk about or take care of ourselves or talk about these kind of issues when they first pop up. So be respectful, but also make sure that you're taking care of yourself too. Let others know what it is that you would like to see, what's important to you, maybe how you would like to be treated. Be responsible for your actions. Please don't blame someone else for the things that you do. If we all take responsibility for ourselves, then I think and not try to play the blame game, then you know what? You made a mistake. Grow. That's it. You made a mistake. Tomorrow's a new day. Learn from it. Grow. Be better. Treat others with dignity, courtesy, respect, politeness, and consideration was another one I saw that I loved. This one, though, really hit me. Communicate effectively and speak in tones of voice that are appropriate for the circumstances. I'm not one who you start yelling and you've lost me, right? You start speaking loudly, you've lost me. So think about not just your tone, but also the volume of your voice. Maybe you're going to be received a lot more effectively if someone doesn't feel like you're yelling at them or if you're not embarrassing them and they're thinking about what's going on around them. Be respectful of others' right to express their views, even if you disagree. That is one of the things I want to just take a moment to talk to you all about. I have some friends that we lean different ways politically. But you know what's really amazing is that we actually talk about these things and we're able to express our views to one another. And even though we may disagree, we're okay with it because we put the friendship above everything else, first of all. But we also actually listen. We actively listen to what the other person says. And yeah, sometimes it can get a little excited or a little heated. But ultimately, we do it in a respectful way. And what's really crazy is that a lot of times we find out that we're not as different as we think we are. There's this thing out there, this entity, if you will, that makes us all think that because we lean politically different, that our views or values are so different. And once you start talking, you find out that really it isn't. It's just that we forgot to stop and actively listen to one another and what they're saying. We're so busy yelling at each other that we're allowing this divisiveness to happen. And so that would be, if nothing else, I would say include that in your definition, right?
More hate is not going to get us anywhere.
Anywhere.
Yep.
Right? Be respectful.
Yep.
And then, of course, with our incivility definitions, I already gave you guys a bunch at the top of the show today. But again, I have to point us back to episode 3 where we gave a ton of examples. I'm not going to go through those because I'd rather focus on the positive. Big surprise.
Do you love news about LinkedIn, Indeed, Google, and just about every other recruitment tech company out there?
Hell yeah. I'm Chad.
I'm Cheese.
We're the Chad and Cheese Podcast.
All the latest recruiting news and insights are on our show.
Dripping in snark and attitude.
Subscribe today wherever you listen to your podcasts. We out.
You made a really great point about, we can still have differences and still connect on a civil level. And, this is something I've struggled with personally. If somebody is seemingly so far from what I believe, is it better for me to cut them off? To send a message that, I'm not going to tolerate that? Or is it better to continue to have conversations and hope that maybe I make an impact and change the way that they think? And I may never change the way they think. That's within their
Open their eyes.
Right. That's within their power only. It's not within mine. But the thing that I've realized, and we're all built a little bit differently, but for me personally, I don't have it in my heart to cut people out of my life because they believe a particular thing. I would rather keep them in my life and hopefully continue to have conversations where maybe I can get them to think about things a little bit differently. I personally do not believe that cutting people off helps us with the divisiveness. I think it makes that worse because we're basically proving, yeah, we don't want anything to do with you because you don't believe the same things we believe. Where, if you look for ways to build bridges, I think that can open doors. I'm totally mixing metaphors here, but it doesn't matter. Bridges, doors, windows, whatever. But it can eventually open doors for people to see things differently. Like I think about, everybody knows Deborah now because she's been on one of her episodes. But when Deborah and I met in college, she was a conservative. I was a bleeding heart liberal. So I was a warm, fuzzy social worker, who believed very strongly in helping everybody and in social programs and all of that. And she thought very differently. And we had passionate arguments about it. Passionate arguments,
Oh, yeah.
And I think we both helped each other develop a more complete perspective. Because she helped me to see things that I may not have considered. And I helped her to see things that she had not considered. And those conversations were really helpful, really impactful. And unfortunately, I don't think we have them often enough. And nowadays, it really is sort of this pick a side and that's it, And so I think the more that we can extend, there's another metaphor for you, olive branches, but where we can have those kinds of conversations and try to understand each other better versus just defending our own position. It's like we always say, when you're having a difficult conversation, you've got to listen more than you talk. You've got to hear what the other person is saying, not just prepare to respond. It's the same kind of thing on a different level. So,
and I think one more thing that I want to throw in there is we're not saying that if someone thinks that, say, racism is okay.
Right.
Like, no.
Right.
No.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about here. It is not okay. And that is something where you absolutely can put or should put your foot down, at least in my opinion. Here's what I mean. There's no way I am going to allow someone to speak things in front of me. People use mental retardation, which is a clinical diagnosis, and they use the R word. And guess what? You don't say that in front of me. I tell people, hey, that is actually a clinical diagnosis. You've got the term wrong. And if you would not use that word in front of me, I appreciate that. So stand up for what you believe. But notice I'm not yelling at them, screaming at them, calling them all these words. I'm just saying, don't do that in front of me. And so when we're talking about having conversations, obviously we want you to have these conversations, but we also want you to stand up for yourself. If there are words, and you guys can think of the words that I'm referring to, that you don't want to hear, then tell people, do not use that in front of me, but do it in a respectful manner. And honestly, what I've noticed is that people actually are really responsive to that. The people that I have said, please don't use that word in front of me. And again, I'm using mental retardation. They don't do it. And they say, I'm so sorry. I didn't really think about that. And maybe in the future, they won't use it in front of others.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because again, you have hopefully planted a seed that gets them to think about the terminology that they're using.
And what it really, the impact, the effect, what it really means.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit more about consequences, because in the workplace, when you use certain words or you engage in certain actions, there should be consequences. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But this leads really nicely into the next part of a policy, which is responsibility. So as I alluded to before, both leadership and employees have responsibilities of varying levels with respect to workplace civility. So all employees, no matter what position they are in, whether they have any management level responsibilities or not, are responsible for contributing to a civil culture. And that means that you need to act in a professional manner, and you should be promoting a safe, healthy, inclusive, and productive work environment. So we want to make sure that you guys are doing that. Now, part of this is that the company should be empowering you, as we said before, to stand up and to set boundaries. So if somebody comes to you and says something, whatever it may be, and I can't think of an example right off the top of my head, but you could politely say, let's take gossip. Okay, there's an example, because gossip is not a civil behavior.
No.
It's so destructive. So let's say that somebody comes to you and you are, a general employee, you have no management responsibility whatsoever, and they start gossiping about so-and-so that's in your department. You could absolutely say, you know what? I really don't want to hear this. And if they don't stop talking, you could get up and walk away. It's a simple thing to do, but it's so important, because if you do it, then that person's going to know that they can't come gossip to you. And you may model that behavior for somebody else who may also say, you know what? I don't really want to hear this either. And if everybody started doing that to the person who's gossiping, then that person eventually is going to stop, because they're not getting anywhere with it. Right?
Yep.
Because you think about the motivation. What does gossiping get somebody? It gives them a sense of power. It gives them a sense of, influence. I don't exactly belonging. Yes. Being in the know, importance.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, if you take that out, it takes away the incentive for them to gossip. And I think this is one of the areas where employees really don't recognize their power. Now, it's a little bit more complicated when it is a manager who is part of the problem. But again, if the employees push back and say, if a manager comes to you and starts gossiping about somebody, and you politely say, you know what, I really don't want to hear this. I work with this person. I respect this person. I don't want to hear it. That's a very respectful thing to say, and if that manager were to retaliate against you, we would encourage you to go talk to HR, or to go talk to that manager's manager. But again, you can model the behavior you want to see. My other suggestion for employees would be to go to the source. So I've had several issues with some of my clients recently where one person is stirring the pot, and they are going to this person and saying this, and going to this other person and saying this, and going to a third person and saying yet another thing. And everybody's in a tizzy about all of it, because it is the grapevine, and the gossip is live and well. And it is going around and around and around, and everybody's getting all bent out of shape, but nobody is talking to the source. So if, for example, if somebody came to Trisha and said, Julie said blah, 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 if Trisha just came to me and said, hey, Julie, I heard this. Did you say this? We could clear it up right then. Because I would either say...
That's exactly what I would do too.
Right. Yeah. I would either say, no, I did not. Or I would say, well, I said a version of that. Or I might say, yeah, you know what I did because I was ticked off about whatever and I shouldn't have done it. And I'm really sorry. And I'll go fix it now, But you do have power as an employee. Like you don't have to put up with things. So again, you have to do it in a respectful and professional manner, but you can do that. Now, management has a greater responsibility because you need to call out incivil behavior wherever you see it. So if somebody in a meeting is interrupting somebody, you need to stop them and you need to say, hey, I really want to hear what Trisha has to say. I'll let you have the floor next. But you have to redirect people because sometimes, number one, they don't recognize they're doing it. Or number two, they know they can get away with it. So either way, you're just professionally...
Again, if you don't stop it, you are endorsing it.
Right. So you are just redirecting, and you do that enough times, people are going to recognize that they don't get anything out of the initial behavior that they were engaging in.
And notice what Julie said. She said that respectfully. She didn't say, don't interrupt, don't do this, don't do that, you're doing this. She said, hold on, let's have so-and-so finish, and then we'll give you a chance. Even that was an example of civility.
Yes. Yes.
Well done, Jules.
Thanks. All right, Trish, why don't you talk a little bit about complaint mechanisms?
I would love to do so. Before we talk about complaint mechanisms, I want to just jump onto what Julie just said because it actually is the beginning of complaint mechanisms. Notice how she said, talk to the person directly first. I would maybe remind people that you would want them to go to the person with whom they're having the issue first. Try to resolve the issue. And we've already mentioned having those tough conversations. And hey, guess what? We even had an episode on it. So was that back in season 1, Jules?
Oh, I don't know.
The tough conversations? I think it was season 1.
I believe it was season 1, yes.
So back in season 1, we did have having tough conversations episode. So maybe direct your employees there or go look at it yourself and remember. But the idea is resolving the issue with the source first. So you could use that as the first step. Now, we're not saying that, okay, that's it, wash your hands, because after that, you have to decide what you want your steps to be. Do you want them to go to management? Do you want to, because, wouldn't that be nice? Because management should handle gossip and squabbles and all of that kind of stuff. That should not even make it to HR. So maybe your next step is take it to management. Or if management is the problem, take it to their skip level manager, right? So maybe that is your next step. But then finally go to HR. And then help them understand that HR's first step for you or for them is going to be resolution. They're going to work on trying to help you resolve the issue. They're not going to resolve it for you. Everybody thinks that if they go to HR, HR is going to be like the mom or your therapist or something like that. That is not their job. We're not telling your employees that you're going to resolve or HR will resolve it for them. But they will give them the tools. That is you guys, right? You guys are the tools to help them resolve the issue themselves. But ultimately, of course, if they do want to file an official complaint, do you want them to go to HR to file that complaint? Is it okay for them to go to management to file the complaint and then have management come to you? Think about what your process looks like. How do you handle some of your other types of issues where you have a complaint mechanism in place and see, does that make sense here? Or can we shoot for resolution before we file the official complaint? And then if there is an official complaint, which we do not have time to get into today, make sure that you're actually investigating it and looking into it with an impartial eye.
Yeah. And, we have an investigation bootcamp course coming out online. We also
Whoop, whoop.
do that live training. So if you need more info on investigations, you hit us up. Okay. So the last part of the policy is consequences and enforcing the policy consistently.
What does that mean?
Right.
Consistently?
Across
What?
the organization. Now, I have already had this conversation several times with several clients this year, because there is sort of this fallacy that you can't tell people that they can't do something in the workplace when it deals with their beliefs or their actions, their language, etc. So I am here to tell you that if somebody violates your civility policy, your kindness policy, your respect in the workplace policy, you absolutely can discipline them. So let's take the N-word, and I'm not going to say it, but I've already had this happen several times this year. So if somebody says the N-word at work, listen, number one, no, it's a no. It's a flat out no, you can't do it. Everybody should know that by now, but for some reason it still happens. So you can
Unbelievable.
absolutely 100% discipline somebody for using the N-word at work. Now, do you have to get them to never use it outside of work? No, you can't. You can't control what they do when they are not working for you. But when they are on the job, when they are representing you, when they are staying at a hotel, driving your car that has your logo emblazoned on it, when they're wearing your t-shirts, when they're doing whatever, you can absolutely enforce your policies. And if you say that they can't say the N-word, which please make sure your policy says they can't use that kind of language, then you can discipline them however your policy says that you're allowed to do that. If you have a progressive disciplinary policy, if they get terminated on the spot, whatever the case is, you can absolutely say to people, and sometimes you need to be this specific, you cannot say the N-word while you are at work or while representing your company. And if you do so, you will no longer work here. Like, it's that simple, right? Now that
Love
goes,
that.
right. The same thing can be said for the F word, and I'm referring to the F word that is a derogatory term for someone who is homosexual. Okay? Can't say that word
Because
either.
you love the other F word.
I do love the other F. The F-bomb is my best friend. So, yeah, we're not talking about the F-bomb. We are talking about the other F word. There's a whole bunch of words, but you can absolutely regulate the type of language that your employees are allowed to use while they are at work and working for you. And you should. And you should be swift and decisive about it. Now, sometimes, for example, I had something recently with a client where it's down south, and apparently there are some cultural references that use terms that we normally would not allow in the workplace. And these were being used. And the managers at first didn't know how to handle it because they're being told, oh no, this is like, it doesn't mean what you think it means. And then of course it got to HR and it got to higher levels of leadership. And it was like, oh no. We don't care what you think it means. It's not okay.
Right.
While you're at work. So we had to have we had to address that issue, and you should address that issue. So the biggest part is that if you're going to have a civility policy, you've got to enforce it. And as Trisha said way at the beginning, if it's just a piece of paper, then shred it. If it doesn't mean anything, why do you have it? You have to enforce it. You have to hold people accountable, and you have to empower
consistently.
Yes, consistently. And you have to empower the rest of your workforce to enforce it as well. Because if they see people violating it and not suffering any consequences, then they're going to be less likely to enforce boundaries or to say to somebody, you know what, I don't appreciate that comment, or I really would prefer if you don't talk to me about this stuff. They're going to be less likely to say that if they've seen that there really are no consequences to violating the policy. So cannot stress enough, you have to enforce the policy. You get what you tolerate.
Boom. Again, need to drop the mic. So, Julie, are there legal consequences that our listeners should be thinking about or worried about?
Certainly, if civil behavior crosses the line into harassment, discrimination, retaliation, absolutely, there's potential legal liability. I will say as a disclaimer that there are state laws are becoming more and more robust. Municipal, local laws are becoming more and more robust. So there may be greater protections than the federal law provides in many, many states and localities. So that's always something to be really careful about. And yeah, as a company, you always want to be worried about potential legal liability, but this is bigger than that. Like, this is really about creating the type of workplace that is going to result in happier, more engaged, more loyal, and more productive employees. And I know in our episode on workplace civility back in, what was it, episode 3 of this season?
Yeah.
We talked about, and we talk about this in our trainings, the business case for diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, and how it really does make you a better, stronger company. So if you don't want to do it for any of the moral or social or just, don't be
not being a jerk,
don't be a dick reasons, then, it also will help your company be more successful. So, yeah.
Oh, it cracks me up.
Okay, so Trish, any other best practices that you would like to impart on our audience before we wrap things up?
I would say I want to go back to our responsibility discussion. Maybe as part of the responsibility section, if you offer training, you should offer training. If not, contact us, please. As part of your responsibility section, you could include that they are required to take some sort of training on kindness or civility or what professionalism looks like. So that would be one of the things I would remind people.
Also, bystander training. We mentioned bystander before. It's not the best term, but a lot of people know it as bystander training. But for those of you who aren't super familiar, there is a concept called the bystander effect, which came out of a case in New York where a woman was assaulted in an alleyway between 2 apartment buildings. And
I hate this case.
I know.
It makes me
there
so
were
sad.
A number of people who saw the assault happen who were in their apartments, but they all assumed that somebody else had called 911. And in fact, nobody else had. So the bystander effect is this tendency for us to stand back and hope that somebody else steps forward. So bystander training is about teaching people to be the one who steps forward, or the second person who steps forward, because that's often the person who tips the scales. So yes, the first person requires a ton of bravery because they're putting themselves out there. But if a second person stands up, then it can really tip the scales. So again, going back to my earlier discussion about, if the employees see themselves as powerless, but they flip that and start to see themselves as having some power. And they all agree that they are not going to engage in gossip. And they all have the same response when somebody comes to them, which is something along the lines of, I don't want to hear it. Please go talk to somebody else, or please don't gossip. If everybody did that, then again, it takes the incentive away from the person who is engaging in the gossip. So bystander training can be a really effective method for empowering your workforce.
That's a great one. Where do I want to go? Ooh, I know. Some other topics that they could include in their definitions of civility: timeliness, respect for your clients, because when it comes to civility, in case y'all haven't figured this out yet, what they do to your employees is what they're ultimately going to do to your clients. So remember, you could include respect for clients in there, healthy conflict resolution, and please, for goodness sake, put the dumb phone down. Put it down.
I also think,
listen to one another.
Trish, I also think it's important to have in your civility policy what employees should expect from clients. Because sometimes the clients are the ones who are being abusive or incivil or whatever the case may be. So what they
that's a great one.
should expect from a client.
Yeah. And what they could do if they experience, like how to respond to them in a respectful manner so that they understand. Yeah. Oh, I love that. And that they will be supported for doing so.
Yep.
Oh, that's so good.
All right. So any last thoughts, Trish?
So we mentioned already June being Pride Month, and that the SHRM article, the being transgender and an election year. Again, Julie already said that'll be in the show notes. That is what started us on this discussion. However, as I was looking for examples and reading civility policies, I discovered something I didn't know, and that August is National Civility Month.
Woo!
So I know, right? How crazy. And I'm really sad to say that I didn't know that, but we do learn something every day. So I just want to say, like, this is perfect timing, y'all. If you don't have a policy, or if you have a policy and it's maybe not robust, or if you have a policy and you haven't been consistently enforcing it, now is the time. Make the announcement. Get this done. Even if you don't understand where Julie and I are coming from a personal standpoint, from a professional standpoint, from a legal standpoint, this is something you need to do. So do it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done. Yeah.
Okay. One last note. As we've mentioned a few times, we are turning a lot of our live trainings into online courses, and workplace civility will be one of them. It will also be part of our online manager bootcamp. We are hoping that we will start rolling those out in August, so coming soon. So always check back for those if you are interested. We will give you more tips and tricks to help you, your managers, and your staff create an action plan for workplace civility. So again, if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. And with that, Trisha, how's that margarita treating you?
Oh, it's so delicious. I'm a big fan of margaritas, and it did help me get through this conversation. So thank you, margarita mamas out there. What about you, Jules?
Well, not surprisingly, the more I drink it, the more I like the wine. So no, but it is actually, so for those people who don't always appreciate the, again, my term, bitiness or the crispness, the citric.
Zippy.
Yeah, the zippy flavor of a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, you may very well appreciate this Sauvignon Blanc from Aveline or Aveline. I really need to figure out how to pronounce it. It is very light. It's a good summer wine for sure. And it did help me through this not so easy conversation. So maybe they need to expand their definition on their label. Pairs well with easy, not so easy, and even difficult conversations.
And to that, I say,
cheers.
Cheers.